So, I was at the beach a few days ago and I was laying down and suntanning. This woman walks by me and she says, I'd sell my kid to Wayfair if it meant getting that house. She immediately tried to backtrack and say, oh, well, I would just actually let them borrow him and nothing sexual, of course. But what happened within this woman's life to make her think that way? To make her believe that that's an okay behavior or subject to joke about? That child trafficking is a joke or something to be swept under the rug? Something deep within her unconscious mind that is causing this kind of reaction where she can casually drop this, suggesting that she would sell her own child to Wayfair. Should it mean that she could have more? Should it mean that she could have a better house, a better car, something more? Suggesting that things are more important than people. Suggesting that her success and her house is more important than the life that she created and her own child. And I feel like this just highlights a massive problem that's within our society today, a massive problem of consumerism and overindulgence, a massive problem that we try to fill this void that we have within ourselves with more. Better cars, a better house, better TVs, better everything. It is the whole statement of keeping up with the Joneses, of always needing to have better, newer, fresher, more. And it's never enough. It's never enough to fill this void within you. This deep void that resides at your core that you don't notice until you're alone. That you don't notice until you stop moving and you lay down in bed each night and you just feel so empty. You feel this hollowness and this darkness, and you would try anything to escape it. You would try to buy anything or drink anything or take anything. We talk about alcoholism or being addicted to pills or prescription drugs, whether it's on the level of needing someone to intervene and call rehab or take your child away, or whether it's on the level where you're just further suppressing this feeling of lack, this feeling of emptiness, this feeling of not enough. So what happened within this woman's life to make her feel that way? To make her normalize this abusive behavior and suggest and joke about selling her child for a better house? What happened within this woman's life to make her feel like that's okay, and to feel like having that better house and having that better car or better whatever would help fill that void? And that void is passed down and passed down and passed down. It's called intergenerational trauma. And when things happen to us, especially at a young age, especially between the ages of 1 through 7, our brains are so malleable. They absorb these beliefs and these patterns as truth, and they become imprinted within us as the structure of the way that we function within the world. And a lot of the time, especially with this woman was in her 30s, so her parents would be a little bit older, and the beliefs that were passed down to them and the abuse that was passed down to them and the things that were normalized such as abuse and hitting or whatever it may be that that child went through, is then imprinted. And if it's too painful to deal with, if your conscious mind can't wrap your head around what happened to you, then you fragment yourself from yourself. You separate this abuse from yourself and you lower it. You stuff it down and you pretend like it didn't happen so that you don't ever have to address it, so that you don't have to look at it, because it's so damn scary. Because it leaves you feeling so damn hollow and so alone, and you feel like you're not enough and not worth it. You feel like nothing that you do is enough. And maybe that's truly where it stems from. The idea that what you do will never be enough. So there's always this counteraction motion of needing to do more, needing to have better, needing to, needing to keep up with the Joneses. But this pit of not enoughness and this pit of trauma and abuse that is undealt with just sits at the core of you and festers. It comes out in these unconscious patterns and affects the world around you. Did you know that having those beliefs and saying something like, I would sell my kid to Wayfair, shouldn't mean getting that better house, has a negative impact on your child? That your child would then believe that a house is more important than their life or than their meaning to you? That a house is more meaningful to you than them? And it all just cords back to the center of unaddressed abuse. And when an abuse or a trauma is unaddressed, it then comes out in unconscious ways, in your language, in your behaviors, in your desires. The thing is that it's not this woman's fault that she has this abuse, and it was probably undone to her. It was probably passed along and passed along and passed along, and she was never given the proper tools to be able to address it. Never given the proper tools to be able to chip away at what happened, whatever it was. Never given the proper tools to look at it and hold it within the light of compassion and love and empathy, and to be able to say, like everyone, every single person has some pit of trauma, something that was passed on to them, whether it's conscious or not, because our society normalizes these things. It's normal to have undergone abuse. It's normal that child trafficking exists. It's normal that everyone carries these, but no one talks about it. No one says, hey, like, these were the tools that that helped me to address my pain. I'm sure that this woman at nighttime sits alone in her bed or with her partner and just feels this lack. I'm sure that this lack terrifies her, and she would do anything to escape it. She would drink, she would fill it with whatever it was that satisfied it, whatever it was that made her feel like she was enough and she was doing enough and that her role in this life was enough. I'm sure that this void haunts her and it scares her and it petrifies her. I'm sure that she would do anything to escape it. And it's not her fault. All that this woman needs is the right tools and the right support to be able to begin to address this intergenerational trauma. All she needs is someone with a flashlight to shine a light down and say, hey, it's okay, we all carry pain. Bad things have happened to all of us, and it's okay to bring them into the light. It's okay to begin to address them. And it's not as scary as you would think. And these things are more common than you would think. And it's in that space where this part of her that was rejected or dismissed or told that whatever she did wasn't enough can begin to come up, begin to be healed, and this desire to constantly have more might subside. Her relationship with her child may increase. She may become aware that that sort of language and those sort of beliefs are harmful. And you know what? I'm sure that this woman had no harmful intent. I'm sure that relatively she's a good mom, or tries to be. And I'm sure that she wants to do better, but is just not sure how to. Is just not sure where to start, what to start chipping away at. Because when it's unaddressed for so long, the feeling of hollowness just feels so big and so scary. What I would like to create is a support network of people, of parents and professionals who can help hold the space for people to start working through their intergenerational trauma so they're not continuing the cycle of abuse and passing it along to their children and their children's children. Yeah. Because when we have the right support system, it's not so unmanageable. It's not so scary. It's not so dark. It just becomes part of our human experience and part of our strength. It then becomes something that we're not running from, something that we're not suppressing with alcohol, and more and bigger and better. It's something that we can begin to work through and address. I feel like everybody needs this. And I feel like everybody has these traumas. Everybody has these abuses, these little experiences that we normalize and we say, it's okay. It's okay. That happened. It happened to me, so it had to be okay. But if we just bypass it, saying it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, we never shed the correct light and attention down to those spaces that did not feel okay. And we react in unconscious ways from that space because it was never addressed and impact the people in our lives, like our children, often in ways that we don't even see. Often in ways where we don't even realize that we're carrying forward that same cycle of abuse that was done to us. We don't understand that by not addressing our shit, we're actually passing it along. That we're actually repeating that pattern. It's not your fault that you have the shit there. It's really not. I mean, it's not your fault that things happen to you, but it's your responsibility to address and acknowledge it. And all you truly, truly need is the right tools, the right toolkit within your toolbox to be able to begin to address this. And the healing doesn't have to be so hard and so painful. It can be beautiful. It can be so transformational. I'm proposing a support network called It Takes a Village to help parents begin to see this wounding, begin to address it, begin to acknowledge the wounding within their child, and not to react to that abuse, to that wounding with more abuse, such as yelling or hitting or screaming or tantrums or invalidating them or whatever it is, however they react to their child's abuse. Beginning to see that abuse within their child is a reflection of them, that it is a reflection of their own unaddressed trauma, their own unaddressed abuse, and be able to receive the tools and support to provide for their child, because I know within my heart that they just want to do better. I know within my heart that you just want to do better. So giving parents the tools to be able to hold the trauma of their child and hold the trauma of their child without continuing the cycle of abuse. Giving the parents the tools to begin to address their own trauma, their own intergenerational trauma, and just begin to chip away. Begin to chip away at that which is so dark and so heavy. Begin to chip away at that which feels unmanageable. Because oftentimes we hide these things deep within us and suppress them within our unconscious because they just feel so damn unimaginable. They feel so heavy and so dark. But once we hold them within the light of love and acceptance, they don't feel so dark anymore. We don't feel so isolated within our experience thinking, we are the only ones who could have possibly gone through this. That we're the only ones who could possibly hold this trauma, that hold this depth of pain. We don't know why. Or maybe we do, but don't know how to address it. Just normalize it, thinking that's what happens. This is just what happened. Giving people the right tools to be loving and kind and compassionate to their own trauma and their own pain, and be loving and kind and compassionate to others' trauma and others' pain. Can you imagine if the next generation of children were raised by conscious parents who are actively working through their cycles of trauma and abuse so they're not passing it along to their children? Can you imagine if these children grew up in a loving and supportive environment where parents were checking themselves, checking their reactions, checking their belief systems, checking in with themselves, essentially? Can you imagine how wholesome and loving and nurtured those children would be? Can you imagine that those children would then grow up with better tools to raise their children, and then that wave of our generation would be even more awake, even more aware of abuse and trauma and pain, and how to hold it and what to do with it, so it's not stuffed so far down into our unconscious minds that's not so unmanageable? Can you imagine how the world would shift? Can you imagine how this, like, the structure of our society would shift? How our interrelations with every person would shift? Can you imagine a world where people knew what to do with their trauma and abuse? And that world starts with you. That world can start today. And it's not that hard and not that scary. It's as simple as attaining a few tools to help you along with that journey. No matter who you are, no matter if you think that you carry this trauma and this abuse or not, we all benefit from healing. We all benefit from learning better tools. We all benefit from learning how to better hold space. And that is simply what I'm proposing: a better education system around intergenerational trauma and how we can attain tools to work through it. Have a good day.